All right. Welcome to today's Sawtooth webinar. We're really excited for today's topic. We've got a great guest with us, Chris Chapman. I'm going to take a couple of minutes and introduce him in just a minute. Uh, if this is your first time joining us, we'll give you a quick introduction to Sawtooth. We've been around for over 40 years, offering DIY survey platforms. We do all your traditional good stuff, questions, skips, quotas, randomized blocks, all that goodness. And we're well known for our expertise in preference modeling techniques like conjoint analysis and MaxDiff. We've pioneered some things. We've worked with a lot of smart people over the years to take their good ideas and make them accessible to people. Working with people like Chris and others who come up with really smart ideas for how to do good research and do it better. If you'd like to take us for a spin, you can check us out at sawtooth.com. Try things for free. And I will also pitch you on our support team. We have the best support team you'll ever encounter with. So if you're interested in trying any of the things we're going to talk about today, please give us a look. We also do other training events and things, so we just want to cover those really quick. Coming up next week, we're having the Sawtooth Research Training. We've got tracks on doing general research, preference research, diving deeper and becoming an expert into conjoint analysis. We've got a track on market simulators. It's a really fun time. We still have some room for that if anyone's interested. And we're going to be hosting a similar type of event in September, the preference modeling event. This is going to be in Nuremberg, Germany. Similar idea, different tracks kind of aimed at beginners and experts and collaboration with really smart people in the industry. So you can check those out at sawtooth.com/events. Just a little housekeeping. We hope that you have questions. We've got obviously Chris here talking about Relevant Items MaxDiff. We're also lucky to be joined by Brian Orm. He's the president here at Sawtooth. So if you've got any of those really hard questions about any of this stuff, now would be a great time to do that. So use the Q&A section so we can handle those a little better rather than using the chat. We'll try to have some time at the end of the webinar to go over those. And we will be sending out a link to the recording of this webinar. Chris has also shared his slides, so we will provide a link for those as well. All right, the man of the hour, Chris Chapman. I've interacted with Chris for a number of years. He's been a frequent attendee at the Sawtooth conference that we run. He has done a lot of great work for a lot of years, previously at places like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon. Currently, he's the founder and president of the Quantitative User Experience Association, QuantUX. They put on an absolutely excellent conference, lots of people, lots of topics. It's a really great resource for researchers. And he's also written some nice books of using tools like R and Python for doing lots of really great types of analytical work. So really great resources as well. So I'm going to go ahead and end now and turn the time over to Chris. Take it away.
Well, thank you, Brian. Well, I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you everyone for joining. And also, I'll put in a thank you. Brian mentioned our annual conference at the QuantUX Association, which is an online hybrid, low-cost conference we do in November. And we're delighted that Sawtooth is one of our platinum sponsors for the conference. So thank you to Sawtooth for that. Let me share my slides here and go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about relevant items MaxDiff and how it came about and the motivation for it, some options to run it, and a demonstration of how it works in Discover, both from the end user respondent side as well as how you would set one up on your own. And I'll give a shout out to my former colleague at Google for more than a decade, Eric Bahna. Eric was a product manager at Google and now a group product management manager there. And it was some questions from Eric about how to collect information from customers that originally spurred the ideas here. And so we'll talk about some of that, and some of the slides go back to research that I did with him. Okay, let's see. Okay, so the problem for product management is we need to prioritize moderate to long lists of features that we might implement, initiatives, messages to customers, preferences, needs, use case scenarios, whatever it is. And we often are looking at many of these, dozens perhaps of things that we could work on as, and it's very difficult to ask customers about all of these. And so what often happens is we want to create a rank list here. So in this case, we're seeing some features, feature request number 2, number 1, number 4, and so forth. And the product managers need to prioritize these into, very high priority, a P0, moderate priority, P1, or something to do later. It might be a priority 2. And we get sparse data from customers about this. So in talking to customer A, they might tell us 3 things they want, and customer B's focused on 1 thing in a support call, and so forth. So we get very sparse data typically, from our information sources in product management. But we would like to have dense data. So we think that out there in the head of customer A, that there's some rank of priority across these features, and customer B, would have a different rank. And even though perhaps, they're talking to us about, feature number 2 today and the top, that it's actually low preference for them if we could get inside their head in some way. So we want to get denser data from our customers. And one way to do this is to use MaxDiff. And so I'm sure many folks here are familiar with MaxDiff. The general concept is we take this long list of items. Often that's between a dozen, 20, 30, maybe up to 40, although there's no limit in principle. And we break it into something that respondents answer a few at a time. So this is an actual survey that I did for the Quant Association. We were prioritizing 14 classes, and we said, well, among only these 5 at a time, consider these. Which would you find most interesting and least interesting? And so this gave us great data from our attendees of the conference about what they would like us to offer classes on. And so we used it to prioritize those. So MaxDiff randomizes these sets to avoid order effects, and it repeats a few times so people answer multiple screens. So we collect more data. And we can model the preference statistically, both for within respondent consistency as well as, getting the distribution across the entire group of respondents. So it's a very powerful technique, and it has some statistical advantages over, say, simply ranking. It's easier for respondents to do than trying to rank 20 things, and it also gives you better data. So what you get out of MaxDiff, briefly to recap, is a metric scale kind of report of these. And so we're seeing in this case for the classes that we offered in the association, segmentation was the most highly desired class, and then we had a few that were more or less tied in kind of second place, about psychometrics, choice modeling, a survey master class, which I'll put in a plug. Those 2, choice modeling and survey master class, will be teaching next month in Seattle, and so forth. So we get this long list. The anchor option in MaxDiff tells us whether everything is important or not. And so it could be that there's a rank order, but in fact, very few of the things are things that customers actually want. Or it may be in this case that folks told us almost every class had positive interest. And so we can then know that probably any class we would offer would have some people interested, and then we can prioritize that versus other business requirements, like how much it costs, do we have instructors, so forth. Okay, so that's MaxDiff. But there's some problems with standard MaxDiff. And so one of the problems, and I'll talk about each of these, is data quality. Another is the respondent experience. And the third is results that can be difficult to act on. So for the data quality, what we found, and I'll show a bit more about this later, is often in MaxDiff, in the B2B space especially, but sometimes in the consumer space as well, people see an item and they say, I don't know. Someone else does that, or I just don't know. I don't know how to answer. But MaxDiff forces people to state a preference whether they know about the item or not. This is actually an advantage of MaxDiff in most cases, that it forces a respondent. So they can't just say everything's important. They have to pick and choose. And there was one I did recently around some initiatives to prioritize, and all the initiatives are good. And so it's very difficult for respondents to have to choose a worst, but that's actually a good thing. It's good to force them into the trade-off. And in fact, the respondents in this case said that they appreciated being forced into the trade-off. But if it's something they don't know about, then it's low quality data. And in the B2B space, we often see that tasks and vary by roles, especially as companies get larger. And so we may want to prioritize things in a B2B platform, for example, across an enterprise as a whole. But we'll find that engineers, sales, finance, operations, security see different sets of things, but they're not necessarily totally separate sets of things. So sometimes salespeople also do finance, or operations may also do security, or management may also be engineering. And so there can be overlap among these things where we can't simply separate them into uniquely different surveys, but we need a way to adapt it to the roles. So, a second problem with MaxDiff is that it can be tedious. These surveys can be long, and respondents can complain about that. And they would often tell us when I worked at Google that it would be nice to be able to say, I don't know, or no option to a particular set. The results can be difficult. It can feel like we're wasting participants' time. Again, especially if we're dealing with high value participants, such as enterprise decision makers or developers, physicians, folks like that. But even consumers, we want to spend their time wisely and keep them engaged. And also we know, and this is something that has occurred in a lot of MaxDiff research, is that it's more important often to differentiate among the items at the top rather than those at the bottom. So we get a stack rank, but as product managers, generally we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about, is the worst actually the absolute worst? Occasionally there's reasons to discuss that, but mostly we're trying to prioritize good things at the top around how important they are. So we wanted a way to focus more on that. I'll briefly mention a couple other MaxDiff options. This is mostly for reference for you later. Adaptive MaxDiff allows a tournament style progression. Things you like kind of get carried forward. It doesn't solve the problem of relevance of the item, whether I don't know to rank an item. Express MaxDiff solves the kind of length problem by subsetting the items and asking about a subset. And sparse MaxDiff does the same thing. Rather than showing an item multiple times, it will show an item a small number of times, possibly only once, or maybe even not at all per respondent. So it makes the survey shorter by getting sparser data per respondent, but that's a different problem than addressing the relevance of the items. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about relevant items. Eric, Bahna, and I originally called this constructed augmented MaxDiff, which is the reason I do not work in product branding. So Brian, I believe it was Brian Orm, but Sawtooth suggested relevant items was a better name than constructed augmented MaxDiff, and I completely agree with that. So the first case where we used this was a B2B study. So the problem, this was working in Google Cloud, and specifically compute engine of Google Cloud, where Eric was the product manager and also ran the product backlog and kind of prioritization across a number of teams. So we wanted IT administrators to assess the importance of various features that we could work on. So both, new features that would be offered as well as features to improve Google Cloud for IT administrators and developers. But only ones that are relevant to their role. So if they work on networking, then they should answer about networking. But if they work on, some other aspect of compute, then perhaps they wouldn't know about networking. So we needed them, if they didn't know about networking and they said, that's not important to me, was it not important because it's not important to them, or it's not important to the product? And so in classic MaxDiff, there's no way to disambiguate those two. So we wanted to focus in on items that were relevant to them. And because we had a fairly long list of potential features, to save time, we wanted to focus on the ones that were at least somewhat important to them. And so relevant items screens this list before conducting MaxDiff. And so what we did in this study was to ask, is this relevant to you? And so what you're seeing here are disguised, this is from the survey, but we disguise the items here. So for feature 24, do they have visibility into it or not? And if they said that they did have visibility, then we add it to the list to go into the MaxDiff. But another option is to ask, is it important to you at all? And so if they said they have visibility, we had a second task that said, is it at least somewhat important to you? And if it was somewhat important or more, we put it into the MaxDiff because we wanted to prioritize things at the top. If it was not important to them, we didn't ask them about it again. It was kept out of the MaxDiff to save time and to allow focus. But we coded the data. That's the augmented part of our non-felicitous name here. And then we did the MaxDiff for the things that were tailored to the list of relevant items that they had. So it focused the task and made sure that we were collecting data from them on the things that they knew about. So result was that 55% of the items in this study of IT administrators were irrelevant to the median respondent. And so what you're seeing here on the right-hand side, if it's red, that meant that they were saying that the item was not relevant to them. And you can see that for most of these folks, a majority of the items were not relevant, but it differed highly. Some items were irrelevant to basically everyone, but other items were, relevant to most of the respondents. And so, we can use that data to understand respondent roles kind of as a separate sort of analysis, but it really tells us that our MaxDiff became more focused by tailoring this. And we also looked at how many items were shown that were important to them. And we found that if we did this construction and relevant items task, then of the number of items that they saw on the MaxDiff, a higher number of them were things that they had rated as important. And so we boosted the our ability to focus in on the items at the top and understand what was most important to these customers. This led to changes in business priorities. So we felt like it got better data from the MaxDiff, and I have some slides in the appendices, and you can check our original Sawtooth Research Conference paper to compare sort of with and without the relevant items task. But one thing I want to highlight here is that by getting higher quality data and understanding really well things that were at the top of importance for the customers, it had a significant impact for us. And I wanted to highlight one item in particular, this item feature request number 6. So feature request number 6 was the second most important in overall priority, maybe tied with, items 4 and 30 here, and behind item 3, feature request number 3. But this item 6 was the least expensive in developer implementation time of all of the features being considered. Whereas number 3, which was in first place, number 3 was a quite expensive feature if we to develop, and item 6, as I recall, was something like a 10th or a 20th of the cost to develop of what item number 3 would be. So by understanding the importance here and then adding in our resources and effort needed to implement it, we identified a clear winner here. So this immediately went to the number one thing that the team would do, and then we prioritize the other items again by cost and importance and ability to deliver down the list. And so having this higher quality data and focus, we felt like gave us a much better insight into the top. And so we heard from respondents that the surveys felt easier. Some of these were respondents who had taken them in multiple quarters over time, that it was shorter and easier, that they enjoyed the fact it was implemented. And, the executives like this. So when I was working at Google, this led to an initiative to spread this method across both MaxDiff as well as relevant items across multiple product areas. And so this led to teaching more than 25 internal classes about MaxDiff. And so it became a very popular method among not only fellow analysts and researchers, but we had people doing it internally who were developers, product managers, folks from internal operations teams and so forth who were doing this for their own problems, sometimes just collecting data from their own team members to prioritize things. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about how to implement this in Sawtooth Discover. At a high level, there are two approaches, which we've already seen briefly here. One is to pre-screen for relevance, which is, does someone have understanding or experience or insight into something? And so if we think about movies, for example, we might say, well, which of these movies have you seen? If I'm the Academy of Motion Pictures and I want to have people vote on Oscar noms, well, I want them to have seen the movie before they can vote on it, perhaps. Or as in the B2B case that I showed, which of these tasks do you perform? Before you rank though, I want to know if you understand it. But we might also, on a different note, pre-screen for importance, which is an expectation or a preference or a liking or something like this. And so in the movie space, I might say, which of these movies do you believe would be good? Maybe you haven't seen it, but you have an expectation or some knowledge about it. Which of these features would you like? Which of these features are at least somewhat important to you, even if you don't have experience, perhaps? Which destinations would you consider visiting for a holiday, and so forth. So this is a way of pre-screening the list according to a cutting point and then focusing the MaxDiff on the things above it. And then I recommend to choose one of these paths when you're doing this. It's possible to put them together. I'll talk about that later. But there's a cognitive difference in how you're focusing the task and how respondents will answer it. And so as I just mentioned, you can do both, but there's some challenges to that I'll get to. So to drill into the movie ratings a bit, this was inspired. The reason I chose this task was Sawtooth shared a survey a few months ago where they asked about favorite Star Wars characters, and you took a MaxDiff. It wasn't a relevant items MaxDiff, but it was just a standard MaxDiff of who's your favorite Star Wars character and who's your least favorite Star Wars character. And I took the survey, and as a resident of the Star Trek universe, I had no idea. I knew maybe 5 Star Wars characters, and I could not take the MaxDiff because the first screen I immediately was hit with, I think, 3 characters who I didn't even know, and I felt like I couldn't do it. So relevance would be here, asking which of these characters do I know, or maybe which Star Wars movies have I seen, and so forth. But you could also ask me, among all movies, which do I believe are best, whether I've seen it or not. So that'd be a different way to do this. I've created a survey. I took some Oscar Best Picture winners from an online spreadsheet, and the survey, one branch is to ask about relevance. Which of the following movies have you seen? And then we're only going to ask for the best and worst among the movies that people know. And then another branch is importance. For each of the movies below, whether you've seen it or not, do you think it's good or not so good? And so I might believe that a movie is not good, and that's why I have not seen it. And so this is a valid way to collect data, but it's a different question, and we would probably use it for a different analytic decision that we want to make. So at this point, I've got a survey here. I'm going to invite you to try it live, and I'm going to pause for about 6 minutes to give folks to do this. And it implements both of these in Sawtooth Discover. So it starts with a relevance screen for movies, and then an importance screen for movies. And so it'll be a live demonstration of both, which I hope will let you, will inspire some questions. So I'm going to give us at this point another 6 minutes to take that, and then we'll talk about some of the details, and eventually we will look at your data live.
I also went ahead and posted the link in the chat as well for another avenue for people to get there.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, So in Discover, to create a relevant items MaxDiff task, they're kind of two steps, and each one has three parts. So I'm going to briefly go through that. The first thing is we're going to create a master list that will select items from. So in this case, all 15 movies that I showed. And then we'll create a survey item that does the pre-screen to select things from that list, and then move those items to a dynamic list. And so in Discover, there's a list manager in the tools that you find, and basically you create a list. And in this case, I call it movie list, and then I 15 movies, and I pasted them into the movie list. So that's the master list. Then we add a survey item. So in this case, I use two, but it could be a multiple selection. Any number of columns are fine here because you're going to add some logic to select from them. But I added an item that says, for this movie list, have they seen it or not? And then I create a dynamic list. So back to the list manager, and I add a dynamic list, and it says, from the movie list, which is the master, I'm going to carry items forward to the new dynamic list based on this question of have they seen it or not, and which columns they've selected. So in this case, it's only a single column. Yes, I have seen it. So if they say they've seen it, then we've got a new dynamic list called movie list seen. And next, I add a MaxDiff item to use that list. So I add a MaxDiff item or exercise here, and I write the question text. Among the following films that you have seen, which one did you like most and which did you like least? And then I set this, rather than pasting in the items, I tell it to use this dynamic list that I created previously, movie list seen. And then go to the advanced tab for MaxDiff and tell it that it's a relevant items exercise. That gets it to some of the back end, like it will know what, to skip the MaxDiff exercise if there are not enough items selected. Some of you may have seen that where just skipped it. And also gets into some of the estimation logic we'll talk about later. So that's how to do it. Basically create this list and then a dynamic version of it, and then feed that into MaxDiff. Now, after you collect data, the estimation settings for the HB estimation depend on which of these two paths that you've chosen. So if you've done it for relevance, where people only answer about things they know, then I recommend to set the HB. The question is, what do we do for any respondent? So if I answered about 6 movies that I've seen, and there are another 9 that I haven't seen, what should I do about the 9 that I haven't seen? Well, if I said I haven't seen them, and we only want to know what's best among the things I've seen, then I should say I just don't know about them at all. So they're missing at random. Have no data for me. Maybe I would like them, maybe I wouldn't. We don't know. It's random, so just ignore them for purposes of estimating my preferences. However, if we've asked about importance, movies that I believe are good, the ones that I said are not good, we know, because I said this in the response, that the ones at the top that the MaxDiff asked about are putatively better in my estimation. In this case, we set the analysis to use those as inferior to the ones that were asked about. And so it's going to add some implicit choice tasks where I said that those movies all lost to the movies that I said were better. And so you have to think through in designing the survey which of these paths you want to go down, and then set the HB estimation appropriately. Okay, so at this point, at the risk of live demonstration, I'm going to switch over to Discover, and we will take a look at what folks have said in this survey. Okay, and so here's the survey. People have chosen live. You can see the task flow and how it worked. I've got 98 complete respondents. Thank you. That is fantastic. And 42 who have not finished the survey. And I switch to the analysis tab. So first, let's see among the movies that people have seen. Uh, we collect, by the way, I will say in asking these pre-screening, you collect other interesting data besides MaxDiff. So we can look at which movie have people seen the most. And for this audience, it looks like Oppenheimer is the movie seen most. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, Parasite, for example. And so, whereas relatively few people have seen Nomadland or Coda. So we get that data, which is interesting. Now I switched to the MaxDiff relevance task. This is going to take a minute to run HB. So while it runs that, I'm going to go ahead and get it started on the other task. And let's recalculate there. And oops, error. Look at Brian McEwen, something to work on there. Okay, so here we go. So on the relevance, it looks like there were 46 out of our 98 folks who had seen enough of the movies to go into the MaxDiff task. So the other 52 folks, I suppose, had not seen enough of the movies to be able to do that, and so I just skipped over the task for them. And so among the movies that folks have seen in this audience, looks like Parasite is their favorite, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Oppenheimer. And as always in Discover, we could add confidence intervals. If I had asked something like, are you a member of the Academy of Motion Pictures or not? And we didn't have anything like that, but we could segment it and break these out by roles here. Now switching over to the importance. So what people believed would be good movies, whether they've seen them or not, we'll see how similar the results might be. So in this case, we're seeing somewhat different results. So Oppenheimer is the movie that people believe are good. We have more folks who've answered, 78 as opposed to 46. So folks have awareness of what they think are good movies. We have effectively a tie here among The King's Speech, Parasite, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and 12 Years a Slave. And then we have, as is typical for MaxDiff, kind of a winner, a few things more or less tied, and then kind of a long tail of things relatively less preferred. It's a very common MaxDiff pattern. But we see the difference in asking through exactly the same movie list, asking about them in two different ways. And relevant items allows us to really drill in very well into exactly which way do we want to ask about this list. So thank you for the live data, and that's how that works. So, okay, so a few discussion points. So there's a trade-off here. So as I've argued, relevant items allows focused and more enjoyable MaxDiff, shorter surveys and fewer tasks, and higher quality data, depending on your question. However, there are two costs to obtain those benefits. One is that the screening task itself may become a bit long, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. And the second is you need a survey platform that does this. And as far as I know, Sawtooth is the only survey platform where this is even possible. So if you wanted to do it otherwise, it would require custom programming and some R estimation code. So what if this list of pre-screening things is too long? So one possibility is to break it into chunks and only rate a few at a time. So I might say, yeah, here are 5 movies. Have you seen them or not? Here are 5 more. Have you seen them or not? Cat photo to refresh them, and then a few more. Or you say you work in network administration. Well, now which of these tasks do you do? You said you're not interested in security auditing, so we'll just skip those items. So that's another way to break it into chunks and group them programmatically. It's the 4th item here, and then kind of assign them programmatically. You could pre-test the item list and trim it if you need to shorten it from, say 100 down to 30 or something. You could randomly screen subsets of items. That gets into some questions about, are you collecting enough data, and kind of a sparse version here where, if we had 100 movies, might ask, have you seen these 20? And then feed the answer to that into the MaxDiff. So you can do various ways according to, your design goals here. And one that I, like, assuming that you believe the groups are can be, um, separated in a clean way, is to just have a higher order aggregate task where, for example, if you roll a security, then I add the 8 security items. And you could do that by scripting the dynamic list. Okay, so a few questions. One, what if a respondent selects 0 items here? Discover will skip the MaxDiff if there are not enough items, if it's a relevant items type. What if I have some that I want to appear every time? So I always want them to rate my new feature that we're super excited about. And I want to make sure that appears regardless of whether they say it's important or not. Yes, you can add that. You can see in the list instructions that I have here on the lower right that you can add items, remove items, right? Set the list length and so forth. So there are a number of things besides simply selecting them. Can I add random items to ensure coverage? So what if nobody ever selects my item because they don't know about it? You can use the tool to do that, to always, to add some specific items. I won't get into all the logic of how to do this, but a general approach is add the things they say are important, then add all the items. Let's see, you would add all the items, randomize it, cut it to a number like 2, then add the items that they say are important. And so now you've got 2 randomly selected items and then all the things they said are important. So I'm thinking through the dynamic list logic here, you can do that. Then the question is, well, can I screen for both relevance and importance? So get all the tasks that are relevant, cut line for the things that are important, and then only do the things above the cut line. I would say first, probably better off to reconsider and simplify the question to go down one path or the other. They're cognitively and procedurally and in terms of the estimation logic somewhat different. So I like to simplify whenever possible. You can also do Lighthouse Studio and do that and see the R appendix in these slides or in our original white paper to estimate it. Or you can do it in Discover and use an anchored relevant items MaxDiff. So you do the relevant items, so they only see the things that they say are important to them, and then you add an anchored task after the MaxDiff, which says, among a few of the things at the top, middle, and the bottom, is it important to you or not? And that helps set this anchor line for what's important. It doesn't make the list shorter. The anchored comes after the MaxDiff, and so the MaxDiff will be about the relevant items, but then we add an anchor at the afterwards to determine this cut point for. So, for example, in the movies, which of these movies have you seen? And then, and then we might say, relatively best and worst, but maybe a given respondent believes they're all great movies. So we add an anchored item at the end that says, was this movie, good or not? Or maybe they saw all the movies, but they only thought one of them was good. And so the stack rank can be, we don't know what it's compared to, so the anchor lets us add that kind of absolute comparison. So that's another approach here to do that. If you're saying, wow, that sounds a bit confusing and kind of tricky to write a survey, I guess the most important point, which is to pretest and pretest live, even if this just means that you have, 3 people in a sample of convenience, like, your partner or family members, or, some random person in your office or something. Pretest it. And I have never written a survey that I didn't change after pretesting in some way to improve it. It's difficult to get the wording right in these relevant items, and it's easy to make mistakes in these constructed lists and putting them together, and which columns feed into what and so forth. So really pretest this and do it with live respondents, even if they're just convenient folks. By the way, um, before we get to the end, I'll say follow us at the Quant UX Association. You can visit quantuxa.org, join our mailing list. We have a conference in November and various classes, including we teach classes on MaxDiff and conjoint analysis and other related topics. So to review, today and how you might choose among some of these MaxDiff options, if respondents understand every concept, then great, use standard MaxDiff. What are your favorite ice cream flavors? We can assume anyone can decode an ice cream flavor. Fine, standard MaxDiff. If they don't understand one or two things, so we've got our new feature we're excited about and we want to prioritize it against existing features, you can use standard MaxDiff, but you want to add an educational task, whether that's an explainer screen or a concept video. I often do this live using MaxDiff in focus groups. And the focus group makes sure that people understand the concept space and any new things we want to show them before they take the MaxDiff. That's kind of an expensive way to field things, but it gets extremely high quality data and qualitative insight as well as the quant. If they shouldn't rate things that don't apply to them, so we don't want them to put something at the bottom just because they don't know about it, then use relevant items with the relevance approach. If you want a shorter survey because the item list is too long, you have several choices: sparse MaxDiff, where they see a small subset; express MaxDiff, again they see a subset of items; relevant items, where they pre-select. If you have a very long list and you want to identify the top items from it, so an example that I remember Sawtooth showed some years ago was among 300 cities to potentially host a conference. We want to identify the top cities, but we don't want to prematurely exclude anyone. There's a method called Bandit MaxDiff, which progressively hones, it learns from people. It starts with everything, and then as the survey goes, it learns from respondents and then focuses more and more and more of the tasks on the things near the top. So it never drops anything totally, but it zeroes in on estimation at the top. And so if you have a super long list, Bandit's a good way to go. And if you have respondents who are tired of reporting about things at the bottom, they say, look, I told you it's not important to me. Stop asking about it. The MaxDiff is tedious and too long. I want to tell you about the things that I really care about. Relevant items with the importance approach is a good way to do that. So a number of these different things. I should have put a link here. Brian Orm has a great paper that's called something like, Bandit, Express, Sparse, what to do about all those different MaxDiffs. You can do a search for that paper. It's a white paper, explains these in more detail. So conclusion for relevant items. I believe you get higher quality data. Respondents see items that are relevant to them. It keeps them more engaged and focused. You get more data, kind of depending on the estimation path and some of the details I won't go into here. The data end up being augmented by more implicit choice tasks in the importance branch anyway. Things that they said were unimportant, then you don't have to ask about them again, but the tasks get effectively boosted by that. The respondents are happier. The items are more relevant. The surveys are shorter. You probably saw that in the movie survey, that in just a few minutes you can answer two different MaxDiffs about movies and two different approaches and have a relatively good experience. Got a couple links here. Sawtooth has a website out there. So when you get these slides later, you can find these. And there's an original technical white paper that I did with Eric Bahna that was at the Sawtooth Research Conference back in 2018. And now you've seen this approach. It's a great thing about their conference, this approach. People kind of pilot it and present and talk about things, and then when they prove out over time, they may end up in the platform. So it's a great kind of partnership with industry. And I've got my email address here, chris@quantuxa.org, so you can hit me with questions if you have them. I'll try to answer them, and follow us. And I will stop here and take any questions live. We've got about 10 minutes. I'm seeing some in the Q&A, so let me.
Yeah, I'll try to. I'll give you a second to look through them. I've got a handful kind of
You have some
highlighted as
pre-selected.
well.
Awesome. Well, let's let's go, Brian. So
Okay. Just really quickly before we end, I will just share again here really quick. Um, Again, if this is interesting stuff to you, give us a try. Sawtooth.com discovers our online platform. We've got some Lighthouse users. That's our desktop platform that can do all of these things as well that we've been talking about. So if you want to try it out for seeing a movie with families or lunch with a team at work, anything like that, you can try these sorts of things for free. A reminder, if this is your jam, we do this type of stuff regularly, in-person trainings as well as future webinars. And like Chris was talking about, the Sawtooth Conference is an annual event where people come and present and share these things. It's one of the best events in the market research space that I've been to as far as practical, good discussions of interesting things. Um, so as far as our questions go, we did have. Oh, I wanted to show one other thing. So we had a lot of questions about like people talking about should I be doing this or should I be doing that? And I think one of the things to mention is that really you've got this big space of maximum difference scaling, right? And you collect these answers that say this thing was better than these things, and then your worsts tell you that the other things were better than that. And this is a giant space, right? So we've taken specific ways of handling that data and maybe combining it with other data. And we give them names so that we can talk about things so that we all know when we talk about relevant items, that means I am going to drop some items. I'm going to do some type of pre-screening. So it could be, like Chris said, simple two column grid questions. It could be a multi-select. It could be a constant sum allocation type question. Like how you screen things, totally up to you. We're not gonna say that there's one best way to ask those type of pre-screening questions. Just like there's lots of ways to ask general questions in surveys to begin with. So you've got flexibility there. There's not one best way to do it. You have the choice of how things work. So I just wanted to show the UI for Discover a little bit. You have the choice of how to analyze this. So the missing at random is the approach to say, I'm missing stuff for people. I'm not going to assume anything about that. And we're going to leverage the Bayesian nature of the way that we're creating these utilities to essentially borrow information from other respondents. And that's kind of option one. The other option is, like Chris was talking about, if we ask those questions in a way that, like, which of these would you likely purchase on your next shopping trip? We're getting some direction already inherent to that question that things should be, these dropped things are worse. So the inferior, and again, this is all in technical documentation. We basically add more questions that kind of look like MaxDiff questions. So if dropped items are inferior, we're going to add some information like you saw a choice task that said, all the things that were kept were better than this kind of threshold item we put in there, and all the things that were dropped are worse than that. So we can augment. That's where the constructed, augmented. We're adding information and things. So this is the Sawtooth approach. Like Chris said, there's lots of people doing stuff by themselves in R to further augment and do things. We're not going to talk about turf today, but turf is a bundling approach to try to reach as many people as possible with bundles. And when you do this relevant items, you have an option here where you can say uh, dropped items can't reach people. We give them a very large negative utility so that it would never be their first choice. It would never be above the anchor when we do anchoring. So you got to keep in mind, there's not one best way to do all these things. It's a vast land of possibilities. And at Sawtooth, we try to take good, reproducible, robust options and make them available to you. But there's a lot of smart people doing a lot of custom things in this area as well. Like we mentioned, the Express and the Sparse and the Bandit. And it's a fun place to be in. So I just wanted to show that really quickly and just kind of address like there's not one best way to do these type of things for sure. Um, Gave you a little time to chit chat. Were there any questions that you particularly wanted to address live, Chris?
No, I appreciate you highlighting that. I think it's really these different approaches get at different research questions and decisions that folks need to make. And I did see, I think, in a few of the questions, some confusion, and this is maybe due to my part in the demo survey. I did a relevance approach and an importance approach both in one survey. That's not what you would typically do. You would do one or the other. Which movies have you seen? And rate those. Or which do you believe are good, whether you've seen them or not? And then you do, those are different problem spaces for an analyst. And I would only do one or the other typically in reality. But, for purposes here, I put both of those in one survey. And that may have led to some confusion. For example, I said I had never seen it, but in the second MaxDiff, it asked me about it anyway. That's because there were two different things going on. So I apologize a bit for that. So.
Yeah. I had one that I wanted to, someone brought up the idea of inconsistencies in responses. So someone says something's good and something's bad and in different questions and things. Um, Tiniest little address of that. That's a whole nother topic. MaxDiff is phenomenal for data quality because it's really hard for people to be consistent without actually thinking about things because you can contradict yourself a lot. That's one of the benefits of showing the items multiple times and really strengthens a robust design so that everything shows equally with everything else. It's really hard to game a MaxDiff. We actually have a totally separate video and white paper about using MaxDiff for data quality screening. If that's something that you're interested in, again, shoot us an email, support@sawtoothsoftware.com. We'll send you those informations. But the answer there is that it kind of self-corrects. MaxDiff produces a fit statistic like other types of regression. If people are not consistent, they get a low score. And there's been lots of research that shows that low score is a really nice indicator of low quality, tends to really correlate with other bad behavior like speeding through surveys and straight lining and things like that. So great topic. Lots of resources on that topic we can send you as well.
I will add that's one reason I love to pair it with qualitative or to use it even internally with the team. But this concept of doing it in focus groups or whatever, then people can talk about their process and why it was difficult and how, and it really does highlight, their trade-offs and how they're thinking about it.
Yeah, we had a lot of questions about just how this design is working. Some people only said they saw one thing and they skipped the exercise. So again, that speaks to the flexibility part. If you don't screen in enough things, it depends on how you build this list, which again is not one right or wrong way to do it. Like you said, you might want to throw some things in there sometimes, but if you're doing that inferior analysis, you have to recognize that that's going to put some bias. It's going to push up some items. If you're doing it randomly, then maybe you're pushing up everything equally. So again, there's not necessarily a right or wrong way to do it. You might decide we've got list instructions that you can say make sure there's at least a certain number of items in this list. If they don't screen them in, you can say if someone screens in everything, I still want to trim it down and I'm just going to randomly take things away. So again, lots of flexibility, not necessarily one best way to do it, but that speaks to your testing recommendation, especially as you start to get into some of these more advanced methodologies. Get in the mindset of a good tester. Try to break things. Think about what if I'm a grumpy respondent who hates everything or I love everything. Like make sure you're testing those and just thinking through the ramifications of those decisions and how they tie in with your analysis choices and things. It's a fun area, but you use responsibly, I guess.
Something I really appreciate that. And so in the movies, I've only seen two of the movies on the list. And so I never get the relevant movies question. I just haven't seen enough to answer that. And I think that's great. So if you want to know only among things that people know about, You get higher quality data by skipping over people who don't know enough, and it makes the survey better for them at the same time. And so, that implicit logic, I think, is really nice here. But as you just said, Brian, that can all be controlled, programmatically according to your survey goals.
All right. Anything else you want to highlight before we wrap up?
I'm just looking through. I see many. I will highlight for folks that in the Q&A, many of them have been answered. So if you click to the Q&A tab and click to the answer tab, and got a lot of great answers there from Brian Orm in particular, but I think many of them are there. And I think I would love to answer every one of them. So folks, again, can feel free to shoot me an email and I'll try. But I think for now, that covers it.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your time, Chris. As you all have seen, Chris is one of the nicest guys in market research. He's always willing to help people like me come to better understandings of things. We really appreciate his willingness to share that with all of us. Thanks again, Chris, and we'll see you around.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for listening today.